The early days of the internet was a very exciting time. The internet itself was a new and mysterious place, and there was so much optimism about the potential for the internet and for technology to really change the world. It was sold to us as being this democratizing force, that technology, the internet, as it improved, would help spread freedom and make people's lives better. And what we've seen, in fact, is how technology and the internet has been used by the state on an unprecedented scale to surveil and track people and to really create police states around the world to centralize control. And so I'm going to play some clips from the early days of the internet to remind people of the hopium, the hype, the optimism of how they were selling this idea to people.
Browser. It doesn't sound like much, kind of a laid-back word, but there's nothing relaxed about the browser because it changed the face of the internet.
It changed the face of the internet, the browser.
Here's how the internet looked in the 1980s. Lists of text. This is Stanford University, but you'd hardly know it from looking. It's not very user-friendly. It's actually hard to find what you want, and frankly, it was mainly a tool for nerds. And then came this, an attractive, easy-to-use shop window, a gateway to the riches of the internet. This is a browser. The browser opened up the internet to everyone.
It's so exciting! The browser!
It was not at Stanford, but on a Midwestern campus that the second great innovation of 90s internet technology took place. Here, a bright kid named Mark Andreessen was earning minimum wage at nights, writing code in a supercomputer center at the University of Illinois.
And I will say, I know that Mr. Andreessen follows me on Twitter, so if you're watching this, listen. You can handle the critique as any person would. It's called constructive criticism, and it's done to make you a better person.
His prototype browser was a piece of software called Mosaic.
We ended up sort of in the middle of the night starting this project that we called Mosaic. What we were trying to do was just put sort of a human face on the internet. The internet at that point was a tool for researchers and scientists.
For years, Bill Joy had been telling me that someday we'd back a 21-year-old kid who would write software that would change the world.
It would change the world, man.
And lo and behold, sitting in my office is this 23-year-old, not a kid. I mean, he's a very mature, hulking.
What? What a bizarre way to describe another man, sir.
Young, executive, and Mark said this software is going to change everything.
For me, this whole thing started exploding with the invention of the browser, Mosaic, because suddenly the internet was accessible to the average person through this rich graphical interface. You didn't have to know these arcane protocols. You didn't have to be a nerd anymore to access the internet.
So it was so exciting, right? For the first time, normies, regular people could access the internet, and the internet was still very different. We didn't have social media. We didn't have the dominance of Google and Microsoft the way that it is now. It was very different. There were, GeoCities, websites that were very unique and customizable, and it really was a very different experience, but you can hear the optimism, you can hear the excitement, the hype about how this is going to be world-changing, and it's going to make things so much better.
Mosaic put a face to the web. And Mosaic plus the web then finally gave us a way to express to the non-technical person what all of us in computing knew was
this absolute psychopath. He has always been a freak. I'm just saying.
The tremendous value of having networks interconnected. And now everyone's a webhead and everyone's excited about the web. Those ideas have been present for 20 years, but it took a killer application, clearly Mosaic.
Everyone's a webhead. Like, who talks like this? A webhead?
I said, look, if you can recruit all of the guys, every single guy who helped you write that program, then I'll put my own money in it, and we'll just start a company and figure out some way to make a business out of it. And that's exactly what we did. I put $3 million in. We flew out to University of Illinois 4 days later, signed them all up. But my attitude was, if 25 million people are on the net today, 1 million of them are using Mosaic. This was, bear in mind, April '94. and we can displace Mosaic, there's 24 more million people who would like a product like this.
They've always been mercenaries from the very beginning.
Presumably. And the market, the size of the net was doubling roughly every year and a half. So I meant by the time we had our products in the marketplace, it would be 50 million people. So you've got to be able to make money with 50 million people using your product.
It didn't take a rocket science to figure out that there was a big market here. And we had one meeting with Jim and Mark after that, decided to invest, and then set about on a crash program of 120 days to hire 4 vice presidents and a world-class CEO and get the Netscape product shipped.
It was always about cornering the market, having more control and dominance.
Well,
Web time.
Fortunately, you had the money.
Fortunately, I had the opportunity. The money was easy. It was knowing the opportunity and recruiting the people.
Well, in about a year and a half's time, we had 65 million users, the most rapidly assimilated product in history. In other words, no one had ever achieved an install base of 65 million anything. In fact, I don't know if anyone had ever achieved that kind of install base in anything except perhaps Microsoft.
And Beanie Babies.
So exciting for the state, for their ability to track everybody.
Mark Andreessen. And who is this upstart Mark? Well, he's much younger than Gates. He's worth more than $100 million, and he's very, very smart.
He's very, very smart.
Mark Andreessen is a very nice,
So this is a young Mark Andreessen.
intelligent guy.
Sure, because he's standing right over there.
Hi.
He's
This is when he had hair.
also a rich guy, owning roughly $250 million in stock of Netscape.
We often go swimming in that fountain.
He's also quite a joker. The company culture reflects his own. For example, there are the Super Bowl fights, the office decorations, and all over
Oh, it's so quirky.
campus, you'll find his pet monster, Mozilla.
That's Mozilla.
Mozilla is what Mark calls the killer app. Get it? Killer app?
Ladies and gentlemen, Mozilla.
The 90s was such a weird time.
Can you blame him for going bananas? A year ago, this place didn't exist. Today, it's the fastest growing firm in the digital world, worth more than $100 a share before the stock split. Netscape makes Magic Cookies, among other things, principally the most popular program for browsing the World Wide Web, Netscape Navigator.
By the way, what is the Magic Cookie?
When you, as a new user of Navigator, first access the Netscape server on the net, the server issues you a unique cookie, which then gets passed back to the Netscape server every time you come back. So we know for a fact that over 10 million unique people have accessed the Netscape homepage.
These days, he's posing for the likes of Fortune and Business Week.
Are you flustered by it, or are you just bothered by all this publicity?
What a stupid question to ask.
You hate it, don't you?
Well,
No. Why would he hate it, please?
I don't think it's interesting beyond how it helps the company.
But you're an interesting guy to a lot of people.
That's kind of scary.
So does he have a corner office, a penthouse with a view? No, he's got a cubicle like everybody else.
Oh, he's just like everybody else. Look, he only has a cubicle. He's so down to earth.
This is it. And like some of the other programmers, he enjoys a good candy bar once in a while. The
That is a massive chunk bar. That is a hate crime.
congratulatory bottles on the shelves remain unopened, however. And this is really cool. Check this out. We found this in his file cabinet.
We just went snooping in this man's file cabinet. Okay.
This is every issue of Digital Dispatch from CNET Online. Pretty smart guy.
Oh my gosh, he's read articles and printed them out. Genius.
And you know how Bill Gates has a couple of $500,000 sports cars? Mark drives a Mustang.
You see how they're trying to make him sound super cool and like he's normal, he's not, he's not super fancy, he's driving a Mustang.
It's a car. It's a Mustang. It's a Ford.
Oh, there is one thing.
She was employee number 2. I was employee number 3.
Yeah.
What kind of a guy is he?
Uh-oh.
$100.
$200.
We are trying to get him into long pants. And I have threatened, I don't know how many times.
What are these shorts?
Today, Mark definitely wears the pants in this family. As Director of Technology, he's responsible for keeping Netscape at the leading edge, and he uses the net to do it. First,
He uses the net to do it.
by spending a half hour each morning reading the news.
A lot of the
He wastes 30 minutes every day reading news online. It's so exciting on his browser.
Computer press these days has daily news, so I read that. I read a lot of the world news, U.S. news, business news, and so on. I read CNN. There's a concept.
Yeah, sure thing.
I read the Wall Street Journal. I read all of these things online.
What's Netscape's secret?
Netscape's secret is that we're in the middle of an exploding market.
Yeah, and that was the optimism of the time.
Make it easier of actually wanting to keep the riffraff out.
And this is some more background on the early days of Mosaic and Mark Andreessen. This is from the Internet History Podcast.
So the big idea that Mark Andreessen had, the idea that would change the world, was simply to let the riffraff in. It occurred to him that if
make the internet more accessible to normies, for regular people, and not just academics and researchers.
If someone could make a better web browser, they might also make the web itself better. More importantly, why couldn't someone make a web browser that was more friendly to the average not-so-tech-savvy user? Why not add support for images? Why not make a browser that was Windows and Mac compatible so that normal users would feel comfortable using the web for the first time?
And these are good things. I mean, it wasn't a bad thing.
It occurred to Andreessen that if you could make the web more interesting and more user-friendly, then there was no telling what this most democratic of new mediums would be capable of. Now,
democratic, right.
We're going to need to pause here for a bit of historical he said, she said. It certainly came down to me over the years, and I don't think I'm alone in this, that the Mosaic browser was created as a sort of skunkworks project under the noses of the higher-ups at the NCSA. In later years, Mosaic team members who would go on to found Netscape liked to promote the notion that Mosaic was something that they did because they were bored and that the NCSA wasn't very interested in what they were doing.
Yeah, they all have these fake stories about how they're just a couple of guys in their garage. Remember Sergey Brin and Larry Page and that story of them, in Susan Wojcicki's garage and they created Google? No, Google has its origins in a joint CIA-NSA research grant. The entire internet was created by basically the government.
At least at first. As we'll see in later episodes, they would certainly have reasons for wanting to promote this version of events, but it's not entirely clear that this was the case. Joseph Hardin, who was the manager of the software development group at the NCSA, has said in interviews that it was another NCSA employee, Dave Thompson, who was the first one to introduce both himself and Mark Andreessen to early web browsers. He has said, quote, "Both of us looked at the screen. Dave described what he had in front of us, and we said, we can do better than that. That's a complicated system, and the interface looks terrible," unquote. By Hardin's recollection, it was Andreessen who ran with the idea of making a simpler web browser, because Thompson, who wanted to work on the project, was actually kept on existing projects he was already assigned to. What we can know for sure is that a web browser was just the sort of project that the NCSA wanted to pursue at the time. A web browser fit right in with the sort of software tools that the NCSA was already working on. Indeed, interviews with Larry Smarr, who was the head of the NCSA at the time, indicate that making the internet more democratic was very much part of the NCSA's evolving purview.
So, I mean, that's the claim, to make it more democratic, but what they really were trying to do was making it easier for people to use the internet, because once you could get everybody on board and everybody adapted and adopting the technology, then it's a lot easier to track these people, to surveil them.
An earlier project, NCSA Telnet, followed a development evolution that would very much mimic what the world would later see with Mosaic. An NCSA program called Collage pioneered cross-platform real-time workstation sharing programs. And the NCSA was instrumental in developing the computing infrastructure and standards that would make images as common to computing as text.
NCSA is the National Center for Supercomputing Applications.
So the idea to add images to the web, again, This was straight out of what the NCSA was already doing in the early 1990s. So the NCSA's version of history is that the browser project was an NCSA development project from day one. It might have been a smaller side project, but it was part and parcel with what the NCSA was all about at the time. Now, let's look at the counter version of history that would be put forward by those who would go on to found Netscape. It goes something like this. Several of the younger members of the NCSA team were bored with the esoteric research projects they were working on. When Mark Andreessen begins going around the office evangelizing the web and the web browser idea, he's able to attract interest from these other programmers who are otherwise twiddling their thumbs.
Just a bunch of silly guys trying to have fun.
One of the people Andreessen started evangelizing to was his colleague, Eric Bina. Bina was older than Andreessen, almost 30, and a full-time salaried NCSA employee. Andreessen, remember, was hourly. But more importantly, Bina was also a much better programmer than Andreessen. According to this version of events, Bina initially begged off the browser project, but Andreessen's enthusiasm and persistence eventually won him over. Internet lore says that the project partnership was sealed late one night in an Espresso Royale cafe in Champaign-Urbana when Andreessen exhorted Bina, quote, "Let's go for it," end quote. The browser project that Andreessen and Bina went for began sometime in December 1992. A largely unsung hero of both Mosaic and eventually Netscape is Eric Bina. Bina wrote the majority of Mosaic's code. Because he was twice the programmer Andreessen was, he was the only one of the two who could have written some of the features that Mosaic included. But the features were also what made Mosaic such a leap forward in browser technology, and it was Andreessen who was coming up with the features. In that way, they were the perfect team. Andreessen with the larger vision and Bina with the coding chops to make Andreessen's vision work. The division of labor seemed to work out well for the pair. As Bina later told an interviewer, quote, "We each did the job that most appealed to us, so each of us thinks that the other did the hard stuff."
And it does sound like Andreessen at the time is a true believer in techno optimism. He's evangelizing about the future of the internet and the browser and his projects and his vision for the internet. And we do, have him to thank for how the internet ended up turning out.
End quote. In a little over a month of nearly round-the-clock tag team coding, they had their browser ready. It was called Mosaic because it ran on a Unix-flavored operating system called X-Window.
Funny that it's Mosaic, X-Window, and then Elon Musk purchases Twitter, names it X, and Mark Andreessen gave him $400 million to do so.
On Saturday, January 23rd, 1993, the official 0.5 version of the browser was posted to the internet on the NCSA's servers. The accompanying release note from Andreessen himself, posted by Marka at ncsa.uiuc.edu, said, quote, "By the power vested in me by nobody in particular, alpha/beta version 0.5 of NCSA's motif-based networked information systems and World Wide Web browser, Mosaic, is hereby released."
Yay, so exciting. Oh my goodness. Now I want you to listen to what Mark Andreessen has to say about AI.
Proliferate their technology, which they're doing in many areas.
Yeah. AI in China.
And the world, 50 years from now is going to be running on, 20 years from now is going to be running on Chinese AI or American AI, like those.
So he's saying 20 years from now, the entire world is going to be running on either Chinese or American AI. Gee, it sounds an awful lot like what Eric Schmidt is saying.
Your choices.
Do you think that's how it'll basically play out?
Yeah. It's going to run on one or the other.
How will that play out? Like, let's say it's one or the other.
So AI is going to be the control layer for everything. So my view is AI is going to be how you interface with the education system, with the healthcare system, with transportation, with employment, with the government, with law, right?
Why would anybody want to live in a world like that? That is psychotic.
It's going to be AI lawyers, AI doctors, AI teachers.
So AI lawyers, doctors, and teachers. You're going to interface with the government through AI. Why do you think they're putting a Palantir centralized database in right now? It's absolutely insane, and it is the complete opposite of the earlier rhetoric from the techno optimist days of the 90s.
Okay, do you want your AI teacher, you want your kids to be taught by a Chinese AI? Really?
Yeah.
Like like they're really good at teaching you Marxism and Xi Jinping thought. Like, is you know, like the cult. There's another way to put it: is the culture's in the weights.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, how these things are trained and like who they're trained by, like, really, really deeply matters.
Yeah. So having them trained by Silicon Valley elites is going to be better. Right.
And so, and by the way, this is already an issue in lots of countries because they're like, number one, they may not want Chinese AI, but number two, do they want, you know, super woke Northern California AI?
Right.
Is another open question, right?
Yeah.
So there are big questions on this. And so I just think, like, there's no question, like, if you had a choice between AI with American values versus the Chinese Communist Party values, I mean, for me, it's just crystal clear where you'd want to go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but does OpenAI have American values? Do any of the big tech companies have American values? It doesn't seem like it to me.
By the way, there's also going to be direct military. There's a direct military version, a national security version of this, which is, okay, do you want to live in a world of all CCP controlled robots and drones and airplanes and cars?
I mean, is
well, do I want to live in a world with Silicon Valley owned airplanes, cars? No, none of this is a good thing. And AI is already putting even truckers out of business. So who's going to be working in this insane future world where AI is running everything? And of course, Mr. Andreessen is invested in a lot of these AI companies and stands to profit from such a system. And again, it is so disturbing to me to see this, you know, change from how they initially presented themselves, their ideas, their values, their beliefs, the techno-optimist nonsense of the technology is going to be a democratizing force, to you can choose to have an American AI police state or a Chinese AI police state. And those are the only options being presented here. How about neither? Well, that's it for part one, and I hope you guys have a good day.